The envelope wasn't taped to my door like usual. This one had been slipped beneath it, face down. So when I bent to pick it up at 6 in the morning, the bold red ink on the back bled into my vision like a warning flare. Final notice, 5,000 due immediately. My stomach didn't turn. I'd seen worse, lived through worse. But I knew my wife Sarah would seethe when she read it. She was a corporate attorney, sharp enough to shred contracts line by line until there was nothing left but smoke and paperwork. And if there was one thing Sarah hated more than arrogance, it was incompetence dressed up as authority. The HOA president, her name was Linda, but most whispered Karen behind her back, had been circling us for months. The first fine was for leaving our trash can at the curb 30 minutes too long. Then it was a 150-er citation because my son's basketball hoop cluttered the neighborhood aesthetic. I'd paid those to avoid pointless arguments, though every dollar felt like feeding a stray that only came back hungrier. But 5,000 for what? I opened the letter. My hands didn't shake. Years of military service had trained them to be steady under fire. Inside was a claim that my backyard shed violated architectural uniformity guidelines. They'd never mentioned a shed before. The paper ended with a threat. If we didn't pay, the HOA would place a lien on the property and escalate legal action. Sarah read it twice. Her jaw tightened, her eyes narrowing into that courtroom stare I'd seen level CEOs. They crossed the line, she whispered. That was the thing about our neighborhood. Most folks either cowered or stayed silent when Linda strutted through, clipboard in hand, barking about lawns or fences. Some even supported her, too afraid of being targeted themselves. It was a petty kingdom, and she was its tyrant. But this time, the tyrant had overplayed her hand. I was halfway through pouring coffee when I heard something outside. Heavy footsteps on gravel, more than one pair. I set the pot down and moved to the window. 2 figures in reflective vests were pacing at the edge of my yard, snapping pictures of the shed with phones like amateur inspectors. They weren't supposed to be back there. One of them raised his hand and pointed directly at my window. And just like that, the fight had started. I opened the front door with deliberate calm, the kind of calm that used to unnerve younger soldiers under my command. The 2 men froze mid-photo like kids caught breaking windows. One was thin, wiry, with a cheap neon vest that still had the tag dangling. The other was bulkier, his shirt stretched tight under the vest, a clipboard in his hand that looked printed off a home office printer. "You're on private property," I said, voice flat. "Step back." The wiry one cleared his throat. "We're official HOA inspectors, authorized to document violations." Sarah appeared behind me, her phone already recording. She didn't raise her voice, just let each word cut like a scalpel. "You have no right to be here without notice, without identification, and certainly without trespassing onto my client's property. And yes, he is my client." The bigger man shuffled a step back, muttering. They weren't used to resistance, only fear, but this was different. Within an hour, word spread down the cul-de-sac. The HOA had launched a compliance sweep, finding not just us, but several others. A neighbor across the street, Mr. Jenkins, received a $2,000 notice for his fence color. Another family was hit with a $750 bill because their holiday lights had been excessive. Fear spread like wildfire. Curtains twitched whenever Sarah and I stepped outside. Some neighbors nodded at us, silent thanks in their eyes. Others scowled, siding with Linda, hoping Loy, Alti would keep their own fines low. That night, Sarah drafted a cease and desist letter. It was sharp, professional, and backed with statutes that made my head spin. "They've got no legal foundation," she said, sliding the letter into an envelope. "This isn't about rules, it's about control, and control doesn't scare me." But Linda wasn't about to be cornered. The very next morning, another notice appeared, taped directly over our front door this time, like a brand. This one warned of further escalation and accused us of harassment for filming her inspectors. I caught movement on the sidewalk, Linda herself, in her pastel cardigan armor, standing tall with her phone up. She smirked when she saw me tear the notice down. "You think you're clever," she called out, "but you'll regret fighting the HOA." The words hung in the morning air like a curse. That night, I was jolted awake by the sound of car doors slamming outside. Through the blinds, headlights cut across my lawn. 3 figures in dark uniforms stepped out, their chests glinting with badges. The knock rattled the front door like a battering ram. 3 sharp strikes, deliberate, designed to intimidate. I slipped into the foyer, staying low and silent. The uniforms outside weren't regulation. Two Xiu Shini, two new, with no state insignia. Their badges glinted under the porch light like cheap tin. From the shadows of my hallway, I caught the faint sound of radios clipped to their belts, though none of them crackled. Props, stage dressing. Sarah joined me, barefoot but steady, her phone already rolling. "Don't open it," she whispered. "If they're real, they'll announce their agency." Another knock, this time followed by a deep voice. "Open up! HOA enforcement with authority to search for violations." I almost laughed at the phrasing. Authority to search? That wasn't law enforcement, that was theater. But the menace in their tone wasn't funny. My kids were asleep upstairs, my family was in the line of fire, and I wasn't about to gamble. I slid the deadbolt, keeping the chain locked, and cracked the door 2 inches. The 3 men loomed, faces shadowed under baseball caps. One flashed his badge. I leaned closer. No numbers, no seal, just an embossed star glued onto leather. "You've been fined," the tallest one said, "and we've been authorized to conduct a compliance inspection tonight." "By who?" I asked flatly. "The HOA," he answered, as if the 3 letters carried the weight of federal law. Sarah's voice cut through the gap like a blade. "Step off this property, right now! You're impersonating law enforcement, and this is being recorded." The tallest one leaned in, his breath sour with cheap coffee. "Lady, if you keep resisting, you'll regret it." I closed the door slow and deliberate, then locked every bolt. My mind calculated options, entry points, their angles, the distance to the nearest neighbor, likely awake. Old training surfaced like muscle memory. Control the perimeter, anticipate breach, stay calm. From upstairs, the creak of blinds told me our kids were peeking out, scared but watching. That alone hardened my resolve. Through the peephole, I saw the men pacing, one whispering into a phone. They weren't leaving. They were escalating. A shadow moved along the side of the house, the faint crunch of shoes on gravel. One of them was circling. I reached for the closet, slid open a locked case, and pulled free the tool I hadn't touched in years, a reminder that I was not the man to corner. Outside, a hand rattled the back gate. The standoff was seconds away from igniting. The gate creaked open with a slow metallic groan. I stepped into the kitchen, lights off, every motion deliberate. Years of training reminded me, control the ground, control the pace. Sarah stayed near the stairs, keeping our kids behind her. Her phone camera followed me, capturing every second. The side window gave me the angle. One of the imposters was slipping into my backyard, flashlight beam cutting across the shed they'd been so eager to condemn. The other 2 lingered at the front, muttering, their nerves starting to fray. I opened the back door with a steady hand and leveled my voice into the dark. "Step away from the property, now!" The man froze, his light dropped, clattering against the grass. When he turned, his fake badge gleamed in the moonlight. He sneered, trying to puff himself up. "This is an HOA inspection. You can't stop us." I took a step closer, my shadow stretching across the lawn. "I'm stopping you. Leave before this becomes something you can't undo." The man hesitated, long enough for the other 2 to storm around the side of the house. They fanned out, trying to box me in, their cheap radios pressed to their mouths like they were waiting for backup that wasn't coming. I planted my feet, calm as stone. "Drop the act. You're trespassing, impersonating officers, and it's all on video. The next move you make decides how this ends." They expected fear. They found none. One lunged, hand reaching for my arm. Training kicked in. I caught his wrist, twisted, and dropped him to the grass with a single motion. The crack of his radio shattering echoed through the night. The tall one cursed and stepped forward, fists raised. "You think you can fight the HOA?" I looked him dead in the eye, my voice low and final. They thought they could break me, but they didn't know who they were dealing with. Sarah's phone caught it all, the takedown, the threats, the evidence. The 3rd man hesitated, torn between fight and flight. My stance gave him his answer. He backed toward the fence, hands shaking, breath ragged. The one on the ground groaned, pinned and helpless. The tall one's bravado collapsed under the weight of silence. And then, red and blue lights washed the cul-de-sac. The real police had arrived, called by more than one terrified neighbor who'd been watching the chaos unfold from their blinds. The imposters froze, caught between me and the law. The flash of red and blue bathed the street like a warning from heaven. My neighbor's blinds fluttered as squad cars slid into position, doors opening, real officers stepping out with trained precision. Their boots crunched the gravel with a confidence that left no doubt. The law had finally arrived. I raised my hands slowly, calm, controlled. These men are impersonating officers, trespassing. We have video evidence. Sarah stepped forward, her voice steady as a judge. I'm an attorney. I'll provide sworn testimony and this footage. They threatened us, attempted unlawful entry, and claimed false authority under the HOA. The tallest imposter tried to bluster one last time. We're authorized. HOA Compliance Patrol. One officer cut him off sharply. Shut your mouth. Hands behind your head. The command rang like a hammer. Within seconds, the three were cuffed, their fake badges bagged as evidence. Neighbors spilled onto their porches, whispers rippling through the night. Some looked shaken, others relieved. The curtain of fear that Linda had held over the community was cracking. And then, like a vulture circling carrion, Linda herself appeared at the end of the sidewalk, arms crossed, phone in hand. She shrieked, "This is an outrage! They were working for the HOA. You can't arrest them. They were just doing their jobs." The officer nearest to her didn't flinch. "Ma'am, sending people to impersonate law enforcement is a felony. You'll want to call your lawyer." Sarah smiled coldly. "Or maybe she'll want to face me in court. I'll make sure of it." The officers led the three imposters into waiting cruisers, their bravado gone, faces pale in the flashing lights. Linda's protests dwindled to hollow noise as neighbors turned their glares on her. For the first time, she wasn't feared. She was exposed. Weeks later, charges were filed. Impersonation of officers, trespassing, harassment, conspiracy. Linda's name appeared in every report, her reign of petty tyranny dismantled under the weight of real justice. The HOA board crumbled soon after, members resigning, bylaws revised, fines revoked. The lean threats vanished like smoke. Sarah stood taller than I'd ever seen. In her, a warrior in heels and a courtroom smile. "They tried to break us with fear," she told me one evening as we watched the kids shoot hoops in the driveway. But fear is weak when you shine light on it. Months later, the HOA sign at the neighborhood entrance was gone. No more notices, no more threats, no more fake authority in reflective vests. Just families, lawns, and peace. And as the sun set over the cul-de-sac, the only sound left was silence. The kind of silence you earn after a battle won,